Many people ask me questions about Stoic philosophy and practice. I've created this series to provide short answers to the most common, recurring, or confusing questions about Stoicism. This is an excellent and commonly arising question. Is the philosophy of Stoicism self-centered? And what they mean by that really is Stoic ethics self-centered? The simple answer to this question is that yes, Stoic philosophy is indeed self-centered, but, and that's a very important but, it's not self-centered in the way that most people use that term to the exclusion of taking into account or caring about or doing one's duties towards other people. It's understandable that that answer may seem confusing or even paradoxical to many people in our culture because they have this assumption, and it is just an assumption. It's not, something that you automatically have to believe in, that either you are focusing on the self and you're taking care of the self, or you are focusing on others. This is the age-old clash between egoism and altruism. And when it comes to ancient moral theories, the Stoics are very similar to some of the other key moral theories in saying that this is a false dichotomy, at least in many cases. When it's elevated as an either-or, that's a sign of a lack of human moral development. So the Stoics will say that yes, for many people, either you can focus on the self or focus on the other, and because you focus on the self, you're going to find yourself in conflicts with others. But as a human being develops, as a human being becomes conscious of what it is, not only to be rational, but more specifically to be just, to be distinctively humane, you're going to inevitably widen your scope of concern to take in others. This is a doctrine that the Stoics called oikeiosis, meaning bringing everybody into one common community or one household, one oikos, if you like. And it's viewed as a natural development of the human being who develops without the sorts of impediments that draw them into the wrong path. So you begin as a baby very self-centered. You're interested in your own needs and your requirements, and you cry and you expect other people to take care of you, and that's okay. But as you expand, as you take in more, as you develop your distinctively rational human nature, then you start to take into account other people and actually feel affection towards them and recognize duties towards them. And the Stoics think that it begins within the household, but it can be expanded outward in ever-growing circles. This is the way that Heracles, the Stoic, but also Cicero, who is not a Stoic, but is writing about Stoic ethics in On Duties, this is the way that they picture it, these circles, expanding them outward to take in more and more people until you finally take in the entirety of humanity. And people that you don't know on some foreign continent, if you run into them, Cicero says, well, don't deny them water. If you can feed them, feed them. So, you begin with self-centeredness, and then you move as you develop as a human being or as a Stoic towards taking into account other people. So why would people have the idea, specifically with Stoicism, that it is self-centered? I think there's two main reasons. The Stoics themselves say that we ought to be concerned with ourselves and that every being, does want to preserve its own life, bring itself to flourishing. And so it's quite natural that we would think that there is a focus on the self. If you go a little bit further into Stoic philosophy, you'll even see the Stoics talking about a continual perception of one's own body, of one's own self by each individual being. So that makes perfect sense. The other thing I think particularly contributes to it is a misunderstanding of the famous dichotomy of control found in Epictetus, where Epictetus says, listen, some things are up to you. They're within your purview. They are, literally upon you, epumon. They are in your control, in your power is how we translate it. Other things are not. And those things that are in your control, your own thoughts, your opinions, your desires and aversions, your choices, those sorts of things are up to you. All the other things, wealth, bodily health, social status, what other people think, how other people respond to you, that's not up to you. That doesn't mean that the Stoic thinks that you simply disengage yourself from everything else, including other people. As a matter of fact, if you read Epictetus, you'll see him very, clearly saying you actually have duties towards those other people, and that is up to you. So that falls on this side of the dichotomy of control. And how we use external things, that's also up to us. And those external things could be our relationships with other people. So, a proper understanding of the dichotomy of control doesn't isolate the person out and say, screw everybody else, they can all sort their own business out, I'm going to focus just on myself. As a matter of fact, if you're going to develop as a Stoic, you should find yourself being more and more involved with other people. Not in a pathological way where their own problems, their own mistaken views on things, their suffering ends up, infecting your own and drawing you into, their circus, if you like, if we want to use that not my monkeys, not my circus metaphor, but in such a way that you can, in fact, properly respond to them when you find them suffering. So Epictetus will say, commiserate with the person who's had a loss. Just don't groan inwardly. That is being other-centered, but in a way that's also compatible with being self-centered. So the Stoics are indeed self-centered and advocating a certain kind of self-centeredness, but it's one that's very different than what we typically mean by that term. Whether we're deploring self-centeredness in others or we're justifying a kind of exaggerated self-centeredness so that we can have what it is that we want and not care about others. The Stoics would say that understanding of self-centeredness is actually a deficient understanding of it and reflective of a poorly developed character on the part of both people. What the Stoics are advocating is a truly rational self-centeredness, one that takes into account others because our rational nature, when it develops, has us engaging with and caring about and taking care of other people. If you found this answer helpful for you, then please share it with others who might benefit from it. This work is entirely supported by crowdfunding on my Patreon site. So if you find it valuable, consider becoming a supporter at patreon.com/Sadler.